I got some Inktense blocks by Derwent, and I thought I'd share my first go using them with you. So I just wanted to have a bit of a go with these. So I got the smallest set, I got the block of 12, and I went for blocks rather than pencils because I kind of thought that maybe I can use them a bit more like watercolor and kind of transfer some of those skills. I don't tend to use color pencils very much anymore, so I thought I'd look at them from a kind of painting option, painting side of things. So I got 12 colors here, starting with a yellow, orange, red, magenta, 2 blues, a dark and light blue, 3 greens, 2 browns and a black. And they look kind of like pastels, they're about the length of your finger. And I got hold of these because I've been told that they were super bright in color and that you could layer the colors on top of each other without them blending together, which would make them significantly different to watercolor. So the first thing that I did with them was picked one up and I used them just like I would with a pastel. So I tried to draw with them and I set up 3 different papers here. First of all, a 300 GSM artist watercolor paper, then some 250 GSM Bristol Board, a lot smoother obviously, and then just 150 GSM standard kind of sketchbook paper. Then I added water to them just using I think a size 4 or a size 5 sable brush. So I'm adding water and I'm blending the colour together with the water on the paper like you would with watercolour pencils or perhaps watercolour sticks. And one of the first things that I noticed was where the paper was rough and the Inktense block had sort of caught the sort of rough surfaces, that was really difficult to blend in and you could still kind of see those kind of grainy marks. So I thought, well, Bristol Board will be different because it's a super smooth paper in the first place. But as you can see, as I'm trying to blend the colour together with the water on the Bristol Board paper, you can still clearly see the strokes of the Inktense block that I've used. And it was pretty much the same story on the 150 GSM paper. The biggest difference you should be able to see here is how the rougher papers on the left and the right really picked up the colour from the block a lot more successfully than the Bristol Board. So next I thought, okay, I'll paint using them like I would a watercolor block, a half pan, whatever. So again, using exactly the same brush and the same papers, what I was doing here was I was putting water on the brush and then rubbing it onto the Inktense block and then painting directly onto the paper. And as you can see, the Bristol Board is a heck of a lot better. I'm getting a lot more color on there because I'm able to sort of lift it up on the brush first of all, and it's much more like a kind of traditional watercolor or water-based color because I'm not getting any kind of streaks, like I did when I actually applied the Inktense block directly. So looking at the results of my little tester sheets, you can see quite clearly when I go close up the graininess that I was talking about showing up there. And again, with the Bristol Board, it's very, very faint when applied directly, and also those streaks are really visible. And using the sketchbook paper, lovely bright color on there, really strong. But again, you can see the streaks of that original sort of marks. Now looking at the, when I applied it more like a water-based color, much more even, almost like you would see a watercolor. But I noticed with both Bristol Board and the sketchbook paper, a graininess that you can see quite clearly there, and also in the top section of this one, the sketchbook paper, a grainy kind of filtery, sort of bitty, sedimenty kind of quality. So next I looked at layering colors on top of each other because this is one of the things that I'd heard was really, really good for these because they weren't supposed to blend together when you lay them on top of each other because they're an ink, a water-soluble ink. So here you can see me putting red on top of blue, and this should be pretty clear. If red and blue end up mixing together, we should see a purple kind of color. And you might be wondering, well, perhaps you need to leave the kind of blue layer to dry for a long time before you can layer more colors on top of it. Well, I mean, you'd seen what I've been doing here. You saw that top row done first, then the second row done. So I would say there was at least 15-20 minutes drying time for that top row before I put any color on there, before I tried layering the red on top of there. So it had a decent amount of time to dry. So I didn't anticipate kind of any blending together, but you can quite clearly see that even though some of the edges are still nice and crisply defined, where I put red over blue and worked it a bit more with the brush, you can see some of that blue beginning to come off and blend together with the red. It's not a massive amount of color that is mixed together, and the blue shapes have still got a very, very crisp, clearly defined edge, which hasn't gone all fuzzy and diffuse. But that red definitely has mixed, and in this one you can see it quite clearly because I've done 2 sides differently. One where I worked the red hardly at all, and then on the left-hand side I clearly worked that red a little bit more, and you've got a very clear kind of purple look to that. So I thought the best thing to do now would be a comparison between these and watercolor. So I decided to try and use the watercolor blue that I had that was closest to the blue that I'd used from the Inktense block, and then I decided to let that dry and put a layer of red watercolor over the top of that to see how that might blend together and how it might be different to how the Inktense blocks work. Because as you probably know, when you try and put watercolors on top of each other, there's always that kind of risk that the top color will blend together with the bottom color, especially if you work your brush too much. And that's one of the reasons why I was looking into these Inktense blocks to see if that kind of sealed layer, the top layer not blending with the bottom layer, would be something that I could really use in some of my other work. So I do really try and work this one left-hand side of the watercolor one as much as I work the left-hand side of the Inktense block one. So I'm really rubbing that with the brush, and you can see the red and the blue blending together. And in this sort of comparison shot, you can see it's really diffuse, and a lot of the underlayer of blue has really come up and has blended with the red to give you a sort of like purpley brown, whereas when I compare it, there you go, to the Inktense block, you can see the edges of the blue are still really crisp on the Inktense. So what did I think after my first go? Well, I liked the fact they were small and portable. I didn't really like the graininess when you applied the Inktense blocks directly, but I could see how you could use that for texture perhaps in a painting or something. Yeah, the colours were bright, but I don't think they're any brighter than watercolour, to be honest with you. I like the layering effect. It worked okay, but I definitely need to investigate it further. But if you've had a go with them, let me know in the comments below what you think. And you might want to check out one of my previous videos where I did a first go looking at Winsor & Newton's watercolor sticks, which I actually thought were quite similar to these Inktense blocks, both in terms of pros and cons. And you can find the link for that video below. Thanks for watching.